I found a stranger wearing my watch at home, so I collected DNA proof, exposed a 22 years lie, and ended a fake family without a word forever quietly. The first thing I noticed was the shoes, size 12 men's sneakers I didn't recognize. Muddy, arrogant, parked 2 feet in from the hydrangeas I'd planted last spring. Then a Lexus with tinted windows, a convertible with California plates, a pile of cigarette butts crushed into my gravel path like they owned it. I was supposed to be fishing in Vermont until Monday. Instead, a storm rolled in early, and I figured I'd surprise Brenda with a quiet dinner. Maybe finally use that bottle of red we were saving for a special occasion. I should have known better. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Laughter, music, something with auto-tune pounding from my living room speakers. And then her voice. Brenda's giggling, giddy. Not the worn-out past the salt tone she used on me. No, this one had sparkle, like the woman I met 30 years ago. The hallway smelled like perfume. The expensive kind she told me was too much for our budget last Christmas. I followed the sound down the hallway, already guessing what I'd find, but praying. Actually praying it was just a surprise party for someone I didn't know. Hell, maybe one of the kids had gotten engaged. Maybe someone from her book club got a promotion. But no, the dining room looked like a catered event. White candles, cloth napkins, my good scotch on the bar cart, balloons that read, "Welcome back." And at the center of it all, sitting in my seat at the head of the table, was a man I'd never seen before, wearing my old leather watch. My daughter was leaning over his shoulder laughing. My son, beer in hand, clapped him on the back and said, "Told you, man, you're the real one." And Brenda, she sat beside him, her hand resting casually on his thigh, like it had always been his, like this was normal. I stood there for maybe 5 seconds. No one noticed me, no one. And somewhere between the balloons and the scotch, something inside me didn't break. It disengaged like a gear slipping out of place. I turned around, walked back down the hallway, stepped outside, closed the door quietly, like I was afraid to wake someone. No rage, no confrontation, just this expanding, echoing space inside my chest where things used to make sense. You build their world, then find out you were never part of it. By the way, if you're still listening and you're one of the 98% watching without hitting subscribe, do it. It doesn't cost anything, and trust me, it helps the team behind these stories keep bringing the truth with both barrels. Anyway, I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, hands on the wheel, the engine off. I wasn't even angry, not yet, just outside, like someone had hit pause on the movie of my life and replaced me with a stand-in, a cheaper version, someone more fun. Someone who didn't notice the old patterns, the sudden girlish whispers, the weird silence from my daughter when I asked about her birthday last year, the way my wife stopped wearing her wedding ring but claimed it was cutting into her skin. It wasn't just betrayal, it was coordination, practice, rehearsal. They'd been at this a while, and all I had was time, which for them turned out to be the worst thing they could have left me with. The motel smelled like bleach and lemons. Room 114, tucked behind a burned-out street lamp and a vending machine that only took quarters. It was the kind of place people didn't ask questions. Perfect for men like me, older, forgettable, invisible. I paid cash, gave a fake name. No one blinked. The television didn't work. The air conditioning made a sound like it was clearing its throat but never actually cooled the room. I didn't care. I laid down on the stiff mattress and stared at the ceiling for 6 hours, letting the fluorescent light hum a hole in my skull. I wasn't thinking about revenge, not yet. I was just cataloging. Brenda's laugh. My son's voice calling someone else the real one. The way my daughter hugged that man like he was the missing puzzle piece. And then this memory elbowed its way into my brain, something from 22 years ago. Brenda had gone on a solo retreat in the Catskills. Some yoga, therapy, spirituality nonsense. She said she needed to reconnect with herself. She came back quieter, not sad, just off. Said the retreat changed her, that she realized she needed more balance. She stopped sleeping in our bed for 2 weeks. Said she had nightmares. I remember making her tea, asking what was wrong. She said, "Nothing, Gordon. You're just overthinking again. That's your problem." I let it go because I loved her. Because men like me are taught that love means swallowing suspicion whole and calling it devotion. Now the timeline clicked. My daughter had been born 9 months later. That was the first time I felt the silence turn into steel. I drove back to the house 3 days later. They thought I was still in Vermont. No one texted. No one called, which helped. It meant no one was paying attention. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest under the cover of dusk. I had my spare key, slipped in through the side garage entrance like a ghost. My daughter's room was neat. She'd always been the tidy one. Her toothbrush, blue with a little worn flower sticker on the handle, sat in a cup by the sink. I grabbed it and dropped it into a sealed sandwich bag like I was working a crime scene, which I guess I was. Then I crept down to the kitchen. There it was, waiting in the sink. A glass. Lipstick on the rim, faint but not a garish shade. This one had a crack near the base. A man's glass. I checked the trash. Bingo, 2 cigars. One with a chewed tip and a matchbox from a high-end bar in Manhattan. The kind of place I'd never step foot in. I took the glass, slid it into a bag, kept moving. Not a creak on the floorboards. Not a light flicked on. I knew this house better than they ever would. Back in the motel, I laid everything out on the table like a sad little science fair. Toothbrush, glass, swabs, gloves. The paternity test kit arrived the next morning in a plain white box. 2-day shipping. Funny how betrayal is easier to process when it arrives with a tracking number. I followed the instructions, swabbed, sealed, sent, and through it all, I didn't feel a thing. Not grief, not heartbreak, just focus. It was like being back on the factory floor, tightening bolts with precision, letting the rhythm distract me from the heat, the noise, the ache in my spine. It didn't hurt yet. It just felt like a job I was born to finish. The email came at 3:47 a.m. Subject, your DNA results are ready. I didn't open it right away. I watched the blinking notification on the burner phone screen like it might explode. The motel walls groaned with the wind outside, or maybe just the weight of what I already knew. Still, I opened it. 2 lines. Paternity result, 99.98% probability of match between Subject A, Theodore L., and Subject B. No room for doubt, no wiggle, no error. Just the kind of brutal math that cuts deeper than a scalpel. I printed it out using the front desk's half-dead printer. The ink bled at the edges like it didn't want to confess either. Then I unfolded my wallet, pulled out an old, worn photo. Me in the delivery room holding a tiny bundle swaddled in pink. My smile looked stupid now, wide, unfiltered, pure. I remembered how Brenda squeezed my hand that day and whispered, "She's perfect, just like you. I should have known. I should have known." But that's the thing about foundational betrayal. It doesn't just hurt, it reorganizes everything. Like retroactively swapping pieces in a puzzle you thought you finished. Suddenly nothing fits. Every memory gets cross-examined. Every smile becomes evidence. And I sat there in that sour-smelling motel room, realizing my entire fatherhood had been a borrowed suit, worn proudly, tailored carefully. But never mind. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the chair or punch the drywall like in bad T-5 dramas. I just stopped, like a machine out of fuel. It wasn't just recent betrayal. It was engineered, buried deep under years of manipulated trust. A long con with birthday cards and bedtime stories as props. You don't scream at something that thorough. You document it. That was the moment I stopped being a husband or a father. I became an archivist. I dug through drawers, pulled out the manila folder where I kept car receipts, tax forms. I started a new one, labeled it in black Sharpie, Truth. I slid the test result inside. Then I added the photo. Then I added the receipt from the bar where Ted's cigar came from. The bar Brenda never mentioned. Then I added a post-it note where I'd written one sentence. She was in the Catskills. He was in the Catskills. I was going to need more than this. Legal proof, dates, correlations, photos, timeline overlays. I wasn't going to confront them. I was going to indict them with evidence, with silence so loud it couldn't be shouted down, and I knew just the man for the job. His name was Clay Morrow, retired detective. He did private work out of his garage since he got sick of covering for liars in uniform. He once helped a friend of mine track down a con artist's brother-in-law who'd faked cancer. Clay found the man in less than 2 days. I dialed the number. "Yeah?" His voice was all gravel and black coffee. "It's Gordon Klein. I need to hire you." "Who's the target?" "My wife," I said, "and a man named Ted." There was a pause. "All right," he said. "Let's ruin somebody's day." And just like that, it started, the quietest war I've ever fought. No battle cries, no marching orders, just files and proof. And a long, slow dismantling of the lie I once called a family. Clay worked fast. Too fast. Honestly, the kind of speed that makes you realize the truth wasn't buried deep. It was just ignored. Scratching the surface was all it took to uncover rot. By the 3rd day, I had a manila envelope thicker than my tax file. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it, sitting on the motel nightstand like a tumor. I could choose not to biopsy. But you don't hire a man like Clay unless you're ready to bleed. I opened it. First page, a timeline printed in bold red font, like a crime scene briefing. 2001, first interaction between Brenda and Theodore L., linked via Volunteer Committee for Community Arts Funding. 2002 to 2003, frequent shared presence at events. Overnight hotel charges under separate rooms, but matching check-in and check-out times. 2003, June, Brenda's retreat to Catskills. Theodore also logged in that area under corporate travel card. 2004, birth of daughter. After that, it snowballed. There were receipts from boutique inns they'd visited, one in Vermont, one in Charleston. 2-day stays labeled as conference weekends. Brenda had even submitted one as a reimbursable for her old HR job. She forged a signature. Clay found that too. Phone logs were devastating. Late-night calls, midday voicemails, messages time-stamped during our anniversary dinner 3 years ago. While I'd been cutting into filet mignon, she'd stepped outside to call the babysitter and called Ted instead. Then came the photos. They weren't scandalous in the tabloid sense. Worse, they were familiar, intimate. Her laughing at something stupid he said at a winery. Him tying her scarf in the cold. A shot of them on a beach, barefoot, Brenda leaning her head on his shoulder. A photo from 2 years ago, Ted holding my daughter's hand outside a frozen yogurt shop, smiling like it was his weekend with her. But the one that broke the rhythm, that stopped me from flipping to the next page, was a screenshot of a text. Clay had recovered it from a cloud sync Brenda didn't know still existed. Brenda. She thinks you're just my old friend, but she looks just like you. That line, it didn't sting. It sliced, because it was said with casual cruelty, a shrug of a sentence, not remorse, not fear, just strategy. She had been managing her lie like an investment, a portfolio of half-truths diversified over time, and me, I was the janitor, the emotionally available, financially stable placeholder she married to keep up appearances. And my daughter, she'd been fed a version of her life so carefully curated it made propaganda look lazy. I closed the folder. Hands cold, mind calm, something final started building. Not rage, not revenge, just a decision, a pivot in my soul. They'd used silence against me for years, passive omissions, strategic forgettings, polite deflections. Now it was my turn. But I wouldn't just tell the truth. I would gift it. I bought a new folder, labeled it to Ted. Inside, I placed the paternity results, the text screenshot, 2 of the most damning photos. Then I paused, thought about how people remember things, not facts, but symbols. So I printed a copy of that beach photo, Ted and my daughter walking hand in hand with Brenda trailing behind. I slipped it in, highlighted the date, circled it. I still didn't know how I'd deliver it, but I knew what I'd wrap it with, and who'd be watching when he opened it. The gift box was white, matte finish, no gloss, clean, unassuming. Like the kind of packaging you'd use for baby shoes or a sentimental coffee mug. I picked it because it looked harmless, because betrayal wrapped in innocence always hits harder. I bought a deep red satin ribbon to go with it. Not store-bought bows, no glitter, just that single ribbon tied by hand. Precision mattered, presentation mattered. I wanted this to be memorable, not loud, not violent. I wanted it to feel deliberate. Inside, I placed the 3 items, each one arranged with care. First, the paternity results. 1 printed copy on crisp white paper folded once down the middle. I slid it into a transparent sleeve, just like Brenda used for her scrapbooks. Bold letters at the top, paternity result, legal documentation. Second, the photo. Ted, smiling like a proud stepdad, holding my daughter's hand at that beach 2 years ago. He was wearing sunglasses, but you could still see the stupid glint of satisfaction on his face. My daughter, innocent and unaware, was laughing. I printed it 5x7, high gloss. Tucked it just beneath the test. Ah, yes, the test. An unused pregnancy stick I found tucked behind Brenda's hairdryer, still in its box like she planned to use it soon. Maybe for nostalgia, maybe for manipulation, or maybe she was still trying to conceive, just not with me. I placed it diagonally in the box. Let the symbolism do the screaming. On top of all that, a short note I typed and printed in size 14 font. Every child deserves the truth. So do fathers. That was it. No threats, no names, just gravity, cold and undeniable. I closed the lid, pulled the ribbon around it once, twice, tied it slow. Then I stared at it on the motel table for a full hour. It looked peaceful, clean, like just pretending to be a present. The next move had to feel ordinary, routine, casual. So I called my son. He picked up on the 4th ring, voice a little stiff. Hey, Dad. Hey, Jake. Mind if I stop by the house on Friday? I left a torque wrench in the garage I meant to bring to Jerry's. There was a pause. You're still up north, right? I'll be passing through. Won't stay long. Another pause. Yeah, sure. Mom and Jen will be here. We're doing dinner for Ted's birthday." His voice caught when he said it, like he knew how absurd it sounded. Dinner for Ted in my house. "Perfect," I said. I could feel his hesitation, like some part of him wanted to ask more, but he didn't. Good. Friday, that would be the night. I didn't care what they were eating or who brought the cake. I didn't care how many cheap toasts they'd clink or what spin Brenda had fed them. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I was going to hand over the truth like a gift, with eye contact, with calm. And when they opened it, they'd realize I hadn't just figured it out. I had curated it because silence might be golden, but properly wrapped, it's nuclear. The weather had that suburban optimism. Clear sky, trim lawns, kids on bikes. One of those Fridays where everything looks normal from the outside, even if a crime scene is forming behind a front door. I parked 2 houses down. I didn't want to take my spot in the driveway anymore. I'd shaved that morning. Wore my Christmas blue shirt, the one Brenda used to say made me look presidential. She hadn't said that in a decade, of course, but I remembered. Buttoned it all the way up. No cologne, just clean, purposeful, understated. The white box sat on the passenger seat like a co-pilot. I glanced at it once, nodded, then stepped out. They'd left the front door unlocked. Of course they did. Inside, laughter. That autopilot kind that people use to fill space when the room has too much history. Brenda's laugh floated above it. Airy, rehearsed, the kind she used to use with strangers at networking events. My daughter's voice somewhere near the kitchen telling someone to try the lemon bars. Jake's low chuckle. Ted humming. The sound of them humming in my house made my back teeth grind. I stepped into the dining room and the air stopped. Brenda's eyes landed on me first. They did this half flinch, like she wasn't sure whether to smile or reach for the fire extinguisher. She wore a pale blue dress I hadn't seen before, probably new, probably bought for him. My daughter blinked. My son stiffened but stayed seated. Ted, holding a beer, looked up with this dopey grin like I was just another neighbor dropping in. "Gordon," Brenda said, already shaping a lie in her mouth. I smiled. "Just came to drop something off." No one moved. No one breathed. I walked around the table. Each step sounded like it belonged in a courtroom. Not fast, not slow, just final. Then I stopped at Ted, looked him in the eye. "Happy birthday," I said, and I handed him the box. He blinked, smiled nervously. Thanks." He pulled the ribbon without flair, peeled the lid off. It took all of 3 seconds. First, the paper. He lifted it like it might be a joke. The room watched his eyes track across the header. His brow dropped. Then the photo. The one of them on the beach holding hands with my daughter. He stared, said nothing, and finally he pulled out the pregnancy test, holding it between 2 fingers like it might go off. No one said a word. Brenda stood slowly, her face drained. Her hand trembled at her side like she wanted to leap across the table and grab the box from him, but she didn't. Jake looked from Ted to me. His mouth opened, closed. My daughter reached for the paper. Ted didn't stop her. She read the top line aloud. "Paternity results. Subject Theodore L. is a match, 99.98%. And just like that, the world stopped spinning. Brenda gasped. "Jennifer, wait!" "Honey, let me explain." But Jennifer stepped back. The paper still in her hands, her eyes locked on it like it was a death certificate. "You said Dad was," she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I turned, walked toward the door, calm as a man after a long sermon. No shouting, no accusations, just the weight of a gift unwrapped. Silence is a funny thing. Used right, it rings louder than any scream. Ted didn't speak. He just kept blinking at the paper like he thought maybe if he read it again, the numbers would shift. Like DNA was something you could bargain with. He set the test down on the table gently, almost respectfully, like it was a relic, then looked at the beach photo again, slower this time. I watched his jaw tighten. Brenda moved first. "Give me that!" she hissed, reaching across the table, nails out, mascara trembling. But Ted didn't let go, so she lunged for the folder instead, where the full printout sat, the screenshots, the timestamps, the receipts. Her hand snagged the corner. That's when Jennifer, our daughter, stepped in. "No," she said, voice sharp and flat, the kind of tone kids only use when something breaks in their universe. She grabbed the folder before Brenda could, yanked it open. Her eyes darted across the top line like a searchlight. Then, flatly, she read aloud, "Paternity results. Subject, Theodore L. is a match. 99.98%. You could hear her mouth dry up on the last syllable. She kept reading, lower now, like she wanted to prove to herself it wasn't real, but couldn't stop. Brenda reached out to touch her arm. "Sweetheart, please listen to me. This isn't what it looks like." Jennifer recoiled like she'd been burned. "You said Dad was," she started, but her voice cracked in the middle of it. Her eyes flitted toward me, wide and wet and trembling. "You said he was." I didn't say a word. I didn't even blink. The moment was hers. Ted stood up, but slow. His expression was unreadable, some strange blend of triumph and nausea, like a man who'd won something he never wanted. Jake sat frozen, the kind of stillness that only comes when reality punches the air out of you. Fork still in hand, mouth slightly open. Brenda, on the other hand, was unraveling in real time. "Stop it! Stop it! This isn't! It's complicated, okay? You don't understand." Jennifer held the test in one hand now, the paper in the other. Her hands were shaking. She looked at her mother like she didn't recognize her. "Who are you?" Brenda tried to cry. Then that old performance, the lip tremble, the gasp, but it landed flat. Even Jake wasn't looking at her. Me? I just turned, walked toward the door. No drama, no storm out, just movement behind me. Silence. Not a dignified silence. Not an awkward one. A wreckage silence. A silence that replaces everything. I opened the door. The evening sun hit me like a cue. Outside, the world kept spinning. Somewhere, a dog barked. A sprinkler ticked across the neighbor's lawn. A couple walked by pushing a stroller, talking about dinner plans. Behind me, a woman screamed. But I kept walking. I didn't need a finale. I was the finale. And the truth, it doesn't need applause. It just needs to be delivered. The first call came before I even reached the end of the block. Brenda's. I let it ring. Then came the texts. Paragraphs, unhinged, sloppy, panicked. "Please, Gordon, please, we need to talk. It's not what you think. You misunderstood everything." That last one made me smirk. Misunderstood. I gave them printed diagrams, visual aids, a presentation, practically. By the time I got back to the motel, my burner phone had 17 notifications. Missed calls from Jake. A long, pleading email from Jennifer. Subject line, "Dad." That one I opened. She wrote the way people do when the ground has just dropped out, scattered, apologetic, scared. She didn't deny the test, didn't defend her mother, but she didn't know what to feel either. She said she was sorry, said she didn't know, said maybe it was still not too late. She used the word Dad 6 times. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't sure who she was talking to anymore. Jake's messages were different, angry, short, like a man caught between instinct and fact. "Why now? You couldn't just talk to us?" What the hell was that stunt? It wasn't the betrayal that rattled him. It was the presentation, the exposure, the silence, which, ironically, is what he'd grown up around. Brenda always said I was the quiet one. They all said it like it was a flaw, but silence isn't weakness. It's storage. And I've been storing a lot. I went to a lawyer that Monday, a real no-nonsense type named Carver. Clean office, cheap coffee. He wore suspenders like a man who didn't have time for buttons. We started with the will. Brenda removed. Not a dime, not a single heirloom. The house transferred into a private trust under my name only. Brenda would have 30 days to vacate. After formal notification, Jake left his portion untouched. He'd been stupid, but not criminal. Jennifer, that took more thought. Her college fund had been sitting in a high-yield account since she was 14. She thanked me for it once in a Christmas card, drew a snowman on the envelope. I emptied it, transferred the full amount into a separate trust with 2 conditions. She would only gain access after completing no less than 12 therapy sessions with a licensed family trauma counselor. She'd only receive full access after DNA confirmation of any child she ever claimed as her own, because no man deserves to raise another man's lie. Carver blinked when I told him that second part, asked if I wanted to reconsider. I didn't. I'd spent 22 years being sure of things that weren't mine. Let her learn what certainty costs. We wrapped up the paperwork in silence. I shook his hand and walked out lighter than I'd felt in weeks. The next morning, Brenda sent a photo. It was of our wedding, black and white. We were standing in front of the church steps. She'd scribbled across it in red, "This isn't how we end." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it because, darling, we already did. The process server handed her the envelope on a Thursday morning. Brenda was still in her robe, mascara smudged from a night of too little sleep and too much denial. The papers were crisp, clear, unapologetic, separation proceedings. Gordon Klein versus Brenda Klein. She didn't call me that day. She called Jake, then Jennifer, then apparently Ted, though he'd stopped picking up a week earlier. By Friday, the group chat titled Fam Blue Heart was silent, unread, and unused. Jennifer dropped out of school the following Monday, mid-semester, no explanation. Her roommate messaged me, said she hadn't left her dorm in 3 days, said she was talking to walls. I thanked her and did nothing. That sounds cold, I know. But if you've ever built your life around a lie, watching the liars choke on the truth isn't cruel. It's mathematics. Jake stopped calling too. Not out of hatred, more like discomfort. He sent me a short message once. I don't know who I'm mad at anymore. That was it. No punctuation. He didn't pick a side. He just floated off into neutrality, which hurt worse than if he'd screamed. As for Ted, gone. Deleted social media, changed numbers, no forwarding address. He'd done what most cowards do. When truth catches up, they vanish. Abandoned Brenda. Ignored Jennifer. Last thing I heard, he'd cashed out an individual retirement account early and bought a camper. Real father of the year. Brenda tried to fight the separation at first. Claimed emotional duress. Claimed miscommunication. Her lawyer sent a condescending letter implying I was weaponizing silence. I sent back the DNA results and a post-it note with 3 words, "Truth isn't violence." No response. After that, they broke quietly, like a house you forget to maintain. No fire, no drama, just sagging beams and water damage. Jennifer tried reaching out again. Sent a photo of us from when she was 6. Me in a folding chair at her soccer game, wrapped in a blanket, thermos in hand. Wrote, "I still love you, I didn't know. Please say something." I didn't, because I couldn't figure out if she was mourning a father or the illusion of one. Brenda's sister emailed once. Some preachy nonsense about second chances and redemption. Said Brenda had made a mistake. 22 years isn't a mistake. It's a project. By spring, I'd sold the house. Didn't tell anyone. Moved 3 hours north. A little cabin on lease land surrounded by trees and distance. The kind of place where your mailbox is 1 mile from your front door, and no one asks questions unless they hear screaming. No one knows the address, not even Jake. I walk every morning, coffee in one hand, silence in the other. I don't keep photos on the walls. I keep the box, the original white one, on a shelf in the closet. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. One act remained, one final line to underline the whole script. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about clarity, and I knew exactly how to deliver it. The package arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Small, plain, no return address, handwritten label to Brenda L. Klein. She opened it at her kitchen counter, surrounded by takeout boxes and unopened mail. Her new apartment was smaller than the old house. 2-bedroom, 1 bath, ground floor, the kind of place you retreat to, not move forward from. Inside the box, the same white lid, the same red satin ribbon, the same sick feeling rising in her chest before she even touched it. She knew, somehow. She knew what it was. She opened it anyway. On top, the pregnancy test, the same one she'd hidden in the drawer behind the hairdryer. Still unused, still quiet, still asking the same question that ruined everything. Beneath it, the paternity results, framed. A simple black frame, the kind people use for diplomas or retirement certificates. Paternity results. Subject, Theodore L. is a match, 99.98%. No edits, no highlights, just truth preserved behind glass. And then beneath that, 1 photo. She gasped when she saw it. Jennifer, age 6, sitting in my lap in the old backyard, back when we still had the wooden swing set. She was wearing that ridiculous purple tutu, the one she refused to take off for a week. I had grass stains on my jeans and a juice box in my hand. We were both smiling. She flipped the photo over. I'd written 7 words on the back. She called me Dad. I believed her. You knew better. No signature, no letter, no instructions, just that sentence and the weight of it. Quiet, devastating gravity. Brenda sat down, not out of drama, but because her knees buckled. That kind of collapse you can't fake, the kind that only comes when something internal finally surrenders. She cried loud at first, then softer, then into the shape of a woman who had no one left to lie to. She didn't call. She didn't write back. She couldn't. What would she say? The box didn't accuse. It confirmed. It didn't ask for closure. It delivered it. And somewhere up north, in a quiet cabin no one could find, I poured myself a cup of coffee. No celebration, no toast, just the hum of the kettle, the creak of the wood floor, and the faintest sense of peace. Not because I won, but because the lie finally stopped breathing.